Evening or afternoon or morning, depending when you're seeing this broadcast, and welcome once again to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We are coming to you live on YouTube, actually about a 4-second delay, so that's pretty live, from the law office of Alan Butel in downtown Las Vegas. Alan lets us use space in his office to broadcast the show, which is very helpful to me. And Alan does criminal defense and civil litigation cases and is a frequent guest attorney on the show, particularly in firearms cases and so forth. So one of the things we do, if you look at our website, there's a list of the attorneys who generally appear in our show. Or if you want to send me an email or a phone call at the message phone behind me, we will direct you to an attorney that would be appropriate for what you're doing. Wait, I gotta check something. Okay, my outside people say I'm on and looking good. Well, I know that goes without saying. Anyway, this show is about guns, related political issues, and generally self-defense issues. We are on YouTube and as broadcast now, which those shows stay up 24/7 if you go to our website. And we rebroadcast it on the radio, 1400 AM radio, on Sunday mornings from 9 to 10 AM. If you cannot get on YouTube, you can listen live to us on the radio. It'll rebroadcast Sunday morning while you're getting ready for church. The YouTube version stays up. It's available 24/7. If you look at our website or go to YouTube and search Fired Up with Bob Irwin, you will find lots of things that I said 3 or 4 years ago that turned out to be dead wrong, and they're still up there on YouTube for everybody to see. Happens from time to time. I feel a little like Hillary Clinton sometimes, you know, that what she said is up there forever. Anyway, my guest tonight is a murder defense specialist attorney here in Las Vegas, Randall Pike. Randy, I've known Randy for years and years. He sat for many years as a judge in Boulder City, and that's where I first met him as a bailiff, and a very bright guy, and I consider him a close personal friend. Anyway, Randy, if you would give a bit of your experience, background in law and guns, and
Thanks,
know
Bob.
who you are.
Okay, I'm Randy Pike. I'm the Assistant Special Public Defender for Clark County, Nevada. That's a special office in that when the Public Defender's Office can't take a case because of a conflict, our office steps in and picks up what are called Category A felonies, which are cases which carry a potential life sentence upon them, or murder cases, which range, of course, through first degree, second degree, voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, and cases that have the potential for the death penalty. I passed the bar back in 1980, a long time ago. Have been doing murder cases. Well, I started off as a deputy DA here in Las Vegas, went into private practice, where I have handled murder cases and been qualified to handle death penalty cases since the mid-1980s. So I've been handling them for decades, and then I moved into this position where I supervise the murder team, and so at any given time, our office is carrying a caseload of about 50 murder cases, including a number of death penalty cases.
That's one of the things in the show, and it will come up tonight. When I bring cases that I pull from here and there that I think are interesting to our viewers, or that have some point to them that I think viewers can learn from if this type of thing happened to them, I give the attorneys an outline that contains 3 paragraphs, maybe, or 4 paragraphs of the general information. The general information in real cases that are serious cases, there's 6 or 7 banker boxes. Just the part that I would get as an expert witness is a banker box full, usually. It's a lot more complicated than it appears, so we're giving the Reader's Digest version. But, and the other thing I wanted to understand, that I use some shootings that are good shootings, some are questionable, some are just plain wrong, but I pick cases out that have an educational value and so the listeners can put themselves in the position of the defendant or the shooter and go, what could I have done that was smarter than what he did? Stay out of jail, stay out of civil court, which is almost impossible. We're a nationwide show. The radio goes all over the world on 1400 AM, as does YouTube, obviously. So we're using Nevada cases and generally talking about Nevada law. But if you have an actual case, you're involved in litigation, you shot somebody, I encourage you, and I'm sure Randy would encourage you, to get local counsel where you live, because what is a good shooting in Nevada will not be a good shooting in New York City, and vice versa, and so forth. The law is applied is different. The case law is different. Everywhere you go, we'd be happy to direct you to an attorney. If we can't, if you call the number, I can probably find you somebody that is competent in gun cases. But we're giving you advice that may not apply if you're not a Nevada resident, period. So this first story is from the Herald Tribune in Sarasota County, Florida. It took place on the 19th of July, this month. A Pizza Hut employee shot a man who attempted to rob the store on Tuesday night. According to the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office, two masked men attempted to rob a Pizza Hut. It's at 3200 block of 17th Street. If you know where that is, this is 11:30 at night. One of the employees reported that he drew his lawfully carried firearm after one of the robbers pointed a gun at him. The 22-year-old employee, who said he feared for his life, fired 3 times at the robber before taking cover. Interesting timing. The robbers fled, leaving a firearm and some blood behind on the floor, a little blood trail for the police to follow. The sheriff's office responded to reports of a gunshot victim being driven to Sarasota Memorial Hospital. A 21-year-old from Bradenton, that's the local town nearby Sarasota, was there being treated for a gunshot wound. He was arrested and charged with armed robbery. It's funny when you have a shooting at 11:30 at night, and then the local hospital calls and said, I got a guy here with gunshot wounds. We call that a clue in law enforcement work. Anyway, he's arrested and charged with armed robbery. 3 additional men who were in the car with him that brought him to the hospital were also arrested. They were there too. The 3 men, the driver age 18 and 2 others aged 20 and 23, are charged with armed robbery. Each admitted to being involved in the crime, according to the sheriff's office. The case remains under investigation. The ages are the same, and these are not teenage kids. These are grown-up folks. First comment is, this is a really gutsy Pizza Hut employee. He defended the other employees and presumed customers that were there. We don't know that yet, because he had his legally carried handgun. Guy came in, pointed a gun at him. His reaction choice was to fire and then seek cover. Sounds like the would-be robbers fled immediately upon resistance being offered. That's generally common. That's true in about 90% of the cases I run across. I would, as a firearms instructor, I might second guess that and say take cover before, but not knowing the layout and so forth and so on, sometimes it's smarter just, what I've learned in this business is don't second guess the guy who's there facing the gun muzzle. He'll usually turn out to make a good decision. This is a fine job on the part of an armed citizen, and hopefully these individuals, although I doubt it, have learned a lesson and they won't do that again. Looks pretty good, Randy.
Well, the shooting does, and what I saw as having done some civil law for about 25 years, along with my criminal practice, is apparently this employer, unlike many employers, allowed an employee to have a gun. Yes. If you're an employee and you're carrying a gun and you don't let your employer know about it so that you have permission to carry it, then what's going to happen to somebody, even if they did everything exactly right, they're going to lose their job. Yeah. And there's some outcry about that. But then again, if you have permission, implied permission or express permission, in that your employer knows or has acquiesced by allowing you to carry a gun, then there's an expectation that when the time is right, you're going to use it. Because not only is he defending himself, he's defending the other employees. He's also in the middle of a felony that is being committed in his presence. And every expectation is that if you're outnumbered and at least one of them has a gun, you've got to anticipate that the other two have guns as well. And, and when they come in, they're nervous, they're afraid, they react generally badly. And somebody, if shots are fired at them, they'll scare them away. Same thing with lights. If you got lights in your backyard and it's dark, or if they were closing and it was dark and all of a sudden floodlights came on, anything that startles a criminal is generally the first line of defense. And then appropriately, the employee waited there, explained what went on.
Yes, one of the obviously good things here, because it's not in the story, is he didn't chase them.
Right.
He called the cops and stayed put and told everybody what happened and let the police do their job.
Right. That was a similar case to that happened in Las Vegas. 3 people came in with guns into a jewelry store. They held a gun against one of the clerks that was there, and they'd been robbed before, and so one of the jewelers in the back had a gun on him. And as soon as that criminal put a gun against the employee, he came up and said, "This is not going to happen to my employee." And he came up and drew a number of shots and had a very small area of impact, or
accurate fire.
He had accurate fire, and there were 3 people involved in that. The reason I bring that up is because I'm surprised those other 2 guys waited, because on this one they just drove by a local hospital
and dumped the guy
out of the car.
That's generally the case. I was quite amazed by that they stayed there and thereby got themselves arrested.
Right.
That shows they were more concerned about their friend than most of these guys are, because usually when there's 3 or 4 people and one gets shot, they leave him to his own devices, and there is no honor among thieves. Right. These guys were actually honorable robbers.
Yeah. And it's his fault for getting hit by the bullet by the employee. That's right.
That's the problem, is there are generally things that are very similar about robbers and how they do. And I said 90% of the time when you warn them, they'll run off. And the other 10% is why you have cartridges in your gun. They don't always. This is WDRB-TV reporting on the 20th of July in Louisville, Kentucky. An armed robber had been arrested in a November 2016 robbery wherein police say he was shot in the chest by a man he was trying to rob. This is kind of a follow-up. According to the arrest warrant, police say the man was called them to report he just shot a 19-year-old, now 20-year-old, suspect after an armed robbery. The victim told them the robber walked up to him, pulled a handgun, and demanded cash. This is just on the street. He just walks up to the guy and points his gun and says, "Give me money." At that point, the victim said he gave the robber $200, and the robber then proceeded to pistol whip him, hit him upside the head with his gun. Then the victim pulled his own handgun, fired several shots at the assailant, hitting him in the chest. The robber was transported to University of Louisville Hospital for treatment of injuries. Police later determined the gun he used to commit the robbery had been reported stolen. There's a surprise. According to the arrest warrant, which was issued January 31st of 2017, the victim was able to identify the perp through a photo. The robber was taken into custody by Louisville Metro Police. He is charged with receipt of stolen property, the gun, first-degree robbery, and currently held in the Louisville Metro Corrections. This is unusual, but as I say, I said already once on the show, I never try to second-guess the guy who's got the gun pointed at him. This victim certainly tried to avoid shooting this punk by submitting to the robbery. The guy pointed the gun and he gave him $200. 90% of the time, this is when the robber turns and leaves. Instead, he decided to beat on this guy. So then he pulls his gun and fires. Well, certainly a good shooting.
Yes, it is. I agree with you on that. That could have changed like that to change to a bad shooting, because had he given the money, and which he did, and then the robber turns around and starts to walk away, some people are of the opinion that, hey, look, he's still in the commission of a felony. He robbed me and he's trying to get away. And so I'm going to go ahead. I have a gun. He's a fleeing felon at that point in time. And there are some states that have the law that said if he is involved in the commission of a felony, which begins at the planning and ends at the getaway when he gets to a safe place, he's fair game. I can shoot him in the back while he's running away from me. That decision didn't have to be made in this because he was still being beaten. And at that point in time, the emergency or the actual need to protect yourself, because you don't know how long he's going to beat you, what he's going to hit, and whether or not he's going to finish it up with the
with killing you anyway.
That's right.
The coup de grace shot.
That's right.
It's interesting, and Randy and I are on the same page there. When there are states who theoretically say that the fleeing felon can be shot. Now, we all know that went away with police cases in Tennessee in 1986. Remember Law School 101, Garner v. Tennessee? Well, that was after you were in law school. That was back in the old days when I was first in law enforcement. That was fine. You could use your handgun as long-range handcuffs. I can arrest the guy from clear over here. Watch. That went away, and in federal cases, but some states still allow that, and unfortunately, a huge number of citizens believe that, whether it's true or not. And I know you've seen it. We see a tremendous amount of civil litigation where a criminal is shot. He's clearly no longer a threat, and he's shot sometime later, and as he's turning away, in the 1 second of the actual engagement, you're fine legally, I think. But once you can fire to protect your life, and to fire to arrest a felon doesn't work very often in very many states. I'm thinking Texas allows that to actually by state law. It says you can use deadly force to recover stolen property or to arrest somebody who has, stolen property. You can still use your gun as long-range handcuffs.
Well, and that's if that was the law in the state of Nevada, then OJ would never have gone to prison for 9 years. Now, would he?
Yes, it's and that's one of the oddest things when I look at overall. Texas is a great state. They have very, very respectable laws to let citizens defend themselves. But the interesting part is the police in Texas are still under federal law because they're acting as a law enforcement officer, and the Garner case directly involved them. So actually, the police can't legally shoot a fleeing felon, but a citizen next to him can, of all things. It's backwards. The citizens have actually more authority, and I don't expect Texas to ever change that, and I don't expect the federal government to ever change Garner either and say it's okay to shoot. But anyway, this guy gets pistol whipped anyway, even though he surrendered the money. God bless him. The physical assault's in progress. Now he's at risk of death or great bodily harm, clearly. This incident, in my opinion, the gunfire is more than an option. It's actually clearly necessary because he's going to be disabled, and he's going to not only get beat, but he's going to lose his gun and probably die. You think the guy would have stolen his gun? Sure. That's right. Whoopee. Grant Defense, one of our supporters, a company called Grant Defense, they're at 5580 South Decatur Boulevard. It's a corner of Russell and Decatur here in Las Vegas. They are a manufacturer of AR-15s. They actually build AR-15s in their building, and they do some dramatically great modifications of Glock pistols, 19s and 17s. You should stop by and take a look if you're in the market for an AR, particularly a carry gun. And in Glock pistols, they do some amazing work. They are right back door to back door with the Dewey Animal Shelter. So when you go by there, you can go out their back door into the back door of Dewey Animal Shelter and adopt yourself a guard dog while you're at it. Nothing better to have in a house than a little yappy dog. They work great for deterring burglars, or at least waking you up to tell you there's a burglar there. One of the best alarm systems there is, plus they're cuddly. You know, I mean, you should have a dog.
Especially Italian Greyhounds.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Greyhounds.
great, great dogs. Italian Greyhounds, yes.
Okay. This is KCTV5 in Kansas City, Missouri on the 18th of this month. Police report just before 5 in the morning, a resident and his girlfriend are returning from a Walmart after working the night shift on their job. They both work at Walmart. The guy said, my girlfriend and I put the groceries inside, and I was going to walk her back to her car, said the male victim. Then a man dressed in all black came around a corner saying, give me this and give me that, and threatening us with a gun. He gave the armed robber everything in his pockets, kind of like the last guy. But we were backed up into our apartment. The door was open, and he was beckoning us to go into the apartment. Frightened, he made the decision to grab what he knew would possibly save them. He had a gun, a handgun, stashed just inside the front door, and he grabbed it to fight back. As I walked out, he was still holding the gun, his gun. I thought he was going to shoot me. Right that minute, I took a couple of shots and he ran off, the victim told police. Unsure if he had hit the gunman, the victim and his girlfriend went inside the house to hide and call the police. Just like the other guy. He let the police do the job. I do so many stories about people chasing people. Shot the guy. They went in the house, called 911. Responding officers later found the robber dead. The last thing I wanted to do was use my firearm, said the victim here. That's the last thing I wanted to do. Am I glad I had it? Yes, because things could have gotten very ugly very fast if I hadn't. The victim here tries again to avoid the problem of submitting to the robbers. He submits to the robber's demand of the cash and everything in his pocket. When the robber fails to disengage, as I said, 90% of them usually do, the threat escalates. The victim attempts to force the couple into their apartment. What do you think happens if they're forced at gunpoint into their own apartment at whatever time this was in the morning? I believe it was like 3 a.m. or something.
Yes, it's creation of a crime scene is probably what was going to happen.
They're toast.
Well, let's go through this a little bit with you, okay? Now look at it. Let's say the police come and they don't believe what the gentleman said. I said, well, we went over there and we saw this guy, and he's laying down and he has bullet shots to his back.
Yeah.
So, and gee, what is that I smell? Do I smell marijuana in your apartment? Can I search your apartment? You wouldn't mind if I search your apartment, would you? Yeah, this is a crime scene now. I have to search your apartment. So they're doing that. Well, number one, you're looking at a couple of things. You've got evidence of the fact that it was a crime. The deceased had some of his property. Right. Hopefully some of it was identified. There was a crime scene. They had come from someplace. They had a job. He was dressed in a manner that would normally be used to obscure or prevent him from being identified. But how do you deal with the evidence of the shots that may have been on the shoulder or the back? Because what happens when you pull out a gun and somebody reacts to that?
They turn. And that's the problem that we run into all the time. I know Randy's run into it forever and ever. I've run into it in court a number of times, because the schoolyard reaction when someone is about to shoot you or stab you is to turn and start to duck away. And while the bad guy is doing that, you've got your gun in front of your face and up where you can see what you're shooting at, and shots enter the side or the back, sometimes cleanly in the back. There's some statistical data that shows the average person, that average being a 20-year-old who's in shape, can turn 180 degrees, turn around completely in 1.4 seconds or less. And the converse thing is, if you are firing your gun, tests have been done with police officers, and I've done them myself with police cadets in academies, that it takes them about 1.5 seconds to realize there's no longer a threat. So when they try to let their finger off the trigger, those bullets are already launched, because you're firing in your brain when you tell your finger, but it takes about a second for your finger to pull the trigger. So you end up with a mathematical probability that something's going to hit the guy in the back, because when people are shot, it ain't TV, they don't fall down right there. Boom. It doesn't hurt that much. People keep moving when they're hit. You ever hunted a deer and they drop right there? Rarely. They're going to move at least a few feet and maybe a few hundred yards. So people do the same thing. The gunshots in the back happen, and witnesses are a big deal. Video cameras. If you have video cameras on your house, this won't happen. If this house had video, this guy would have never approached this apartment, I'm sure. There's a lot of ways you can make yourself safe, but the thing I like about this case is the guy had a gun stash just inside the front door, where he knew where it was. Probably, I don't know in Missouri what their laws are for concealed carry, whether he had a permit or would have had to have a permit, but he certainly doesn't in his house. And so I always recommend people keep a gun near their front door, hidden, and a gun near their back door, hidden. So you can use that gun to repel somebody who's trying to come into your house, or to grab as you're escaping from somebody who's already in your house, and you have a gun on the way out the door. That was a good thing that he had the gun there, and it's a good thing that then he didn't pursue, let the cops do the pursuit. I like this. This is a great shooting. Is he going to have likely rounds that come at bad angles, right, and a civil lawsuit?
Well, see, I'm not so much worried about a civil lawsuit, because presumably the deceased is going to have a gun there, because he pulled out a gun, at least according to the scenario.
He was apparently armed.
Yeah. And now the question is what do the police do? Are there so many shootings and murders in that area that they just go ahead and arrest somebody first before they investigate and say, let's put him in custody. It'll take us a couple of days to investigate the case, and then we'll determine whether or not it's a righteous case.
Kansas City, it depends on the neighborhood. Kansas City has some really violent neighborhoods.
And I've had cases where they have arrested somebody that was a righteous shooting, and it was later on determined that it was a righteous shooting. After they spoke with, when I say they, I'm talking about the police, but they had a knee-jerk reaction. We got to investigate this, and we don't want somebody that shot somebody to just be walking the streets. And it took us about 4 days to get him out. Well, this is a gentleman that never had been arrested for anything, had a job with great responsibility here in Las Vegas. But in that 4 days that we were able to get him out, he lost his job, he lost his livelihood, and ended up having to rebuild his life. So there. Anytime you get into that, you can't weigh your life against losing a job. You can't weigh your loved one's life against, gee, I'm going to have to deal with this in a court maybe. I said, you have to go with that emergency situation, and you have to react to that.
As I've said, and I know you'd agree with this, that even the most righteous had to shoot the guy, whatever incident, is an absolutely life-changing event. You will never be the same again. There will be, no matter, unless this guy just fell off the moon, there will be a family that will always believe you murdered their relative, that their relative wasn't a bad guy, or even if the relative was a bad guy, that they want to get even. We get that a bit. My bottom line to all of this, and I usually put it as the tail in every book I write, is nobody wins gunfights. You cannot win a gunfight. You can stay alive, but you will not win. It will be an event that you'll wish never happened. So if you get opportunity to warn the guy off, if you get opportunity to give him your $200 and he runs away, do that. You will never recoup the time and expense that it costs to shoot somebody. Okay? It's particularly if they're killed.
Well, one of my favorite quotes is that the law of self-defense used to be simple because lawyers didn't write it. But but then as soon as lawyers got involved in it and put on things, well, you have to be perceived in a situation that a reasonable person would have experienced, that feeling that they were, their life or their family or their home was just being threatened by lethal force.
Exactly. And how do you be a reasonable person when somebody's trying to stab you? Now you're going to say, okay, what would a reasonable person do? Let me think this through. You can't do that. And you're going to do something that can be second guessed. Of course. Otherwise you're going to be dead. So it won't matter.
Right. And you have to convince 12 people on a jury that aren't reasonable enough to
aren't smart enough to get out of jury.
No.
I've heard that before. That's, we joke about that. And I know Randy feels about juries the same way I do. They conduct jury duty if they try. They lie about this, that, and the other thing. The people are there. When I've interviewed some, and I know you've interviewed a bunch after the fact, and they really are trying to do a righteous job. They're paid next to nothing to be there, right? And I've studied some jury deliberation cases and how juries thought when they've interviewed jurors after. I've been able to interview at least once. Was able to interview a couple of juries after a case I was on, and they had an amazing grasp of what was going on. And they're really dedicated people. I mean,
they are. They look at it as an obligation that they have, and those people that don't feel that obligation find some way to get off. And so that's a joke that we say about jurors that really lacks merit.
I've watched that. I've been on juries a couple times, and before I started doing this all this time, but and a couple times after, I was well on teaching security guards. I got picked on a jury on a security guard case of all things. But the juries are the people trying to get out of it were so funny. I was sitting in the big pile. If you ever go there, there's 100 people in the room, and there's a lady there in her North Las Vegas police uniform. She's not on duty. She said she's wearing the uniform because she might have to go on duty if she doesn't have to do on the jury duty, figuring that would get her off jury. No. They looked at that and found a civil case to put her on. Had absolutely nothing to do with police work. So there you are. Yeah. But that's a problem. I've seen judges want to be on juries, and I think that is a terrible mistake to do that. One of the juries I was on, I said for a security officer incident where a guy was allegedly beat up by security personnel. And at the time, I was training security officers twice a week on a case course they're required to take when they carry guns. And both attorney sets thought that my background, I would understand the case from their perspective. And obviously, one of those groups of attorneys was wrong. But the bad thing was that we got the case. It was only 7 hours of testimony or something, and we're lining up, and single file going back to the jury room. And the guy behind me, while we're walking out of the courtroom, taps me on the shoulder and says, "Okay, Bob, what do we do?" And that's why I shouldn't have been on that jury. And, you know, it ended up, I mean, obviously I made a good decision, but yeah, I shouldn't have been there. Bad idea. Anyway, we're off, getting on and off of juries here. A couple of things I wanted to address. Let me see how we're doing on time. Oh, we're doing fine. There was a story on, this is just kind of political stuff. Channel 13 ran a story on the 21st. Las Vegas MPD has gone to social media to promote its efforts to get illegal guns off the street. They had one of the watch commanders in downtown, Captain Andy Walsh, did an interview, and that he said he noticed that other agencies across the country are sharing photographs of confiscated weapons on social media under the hashtag one less gun. He said, we thought, speaking for his downtown area command, that it's a good idea to promote the work that we do in the downtown area command to get illegal guns and firearms from people who should not have those guns off the streets. So he said in the past year alone, his command has recovered 163 illegally possessed firearms. Stolen guns are obviously a huge problem because who has stolen guns? Armed criminals, obviously.
People without any training.
Yeah,
and kids.
And
I'm talking about teenagers that are going to take a gun, and I've the youngest person I've defended has been 14, that was charged with murder. The youngest person that I prosecuted when I was a prosecutor was 14 that committed a murder. And you get kids, and they're treated as adults, but they get access to guns.
And that's an illegally possessed gun, period, because there's no place I know of a 14-year-old unsupervised is legally in possession of a gun.
Right. Unsupervised being the key thing. I mean, they're entitled and should go through training. And we did that in the scout troop. I was a scoutmaster for about 15 years.
We've done that. We've taught kids classes, Eddie Eagle program with the NRA, and the National Shooting Sports has a program for that. In fact, the gun story is where they teach that once a week. If you've got a child that needs to be aware of guns, and they're the age where you want to use the stop, don't touch, leave the area, 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. By the time they're 10, curiosity takes over, and then we need to show them to take the curiosity off of it, so they won't go play with the guns when you're not home. You have a gun in your house somewhere that your 12-year-old doesn't know where it's hidden. Wrong. He knows where it's hidden. When you were 12 years old, did you know what every present you were going to get for Christmas was, because you had found it, opened the box, searched it, Did you go into your parents' bedroom and search every drawer and every nook and cranny of everything when they were at home, even though you're not supposed to be in their bedroom? Yes, you did. And if there's a gun there, they're going to find the gun. Anyway, they're talking about the Metro program here is to help you help them. What they're advising is, if you have a gun in your house, because we don't have pistol registration anymore, you can't call the police and say, I lost my gun, what was the serial number? That you record the serial numbers, you take a picture of both sides of the gun so it can be identified. And Metro then can put on their website, we're looking for this gun. And it may well be that somebody say, I saw a guy that had that pistol last week. The odds are pretty icky, but that'll record the gun, so if they come across it, they know it's stolen. Right now, particularly private party sales, people have no idea. The gun dealer will have the serial number of the gun, but private parties don't. They're not required to, which is a fine thing, I think. You have a right to keep and bear arms and so forth, but part of responsibility is knowing the serial number. DMV keeps track of your car, so you don't have to record the VIN number of your car. You imagine how many stolen cars we wouldn't recover if we had no idea what the VIN number was. So write it down. I understand you don't want the police to know the serial number of your gun and this and that. That's fine, but you need to know it in case something happens to it.
Well, in case it's stolen, you don't want to make a claim
Your
against your insurance company and have them reimburse you for it.
Say, here's a picture of it.
Here it is.
And this is when I took the picture, and it's on, and I took it with my phone, so there's a recording of the date and so forth.
Okay.
Take a picture of both sides of what they're saying. There's a couple of pro-gun people that have attacked this program before it even got out the door. Just as soon as this newspaper or this article appeared on Channel 13, that said the police are trying to seize all your guns. That has nothing to do with anything. The police, this is not for seizing guns. It is that you know the serial number of your gun, and so that the police can track the gun. And if we get a gun in criminal hands, it will reduce violent crime because they'll know it's a stolen gun when they get there, and then they can take the bad guy off the street.
Well, and it's an interesting area because it's in the downtown area of downtown command, area command. High number of homeless people, large numbers of young people that are involved in gang activity. You can go straight down that street by street and identify the gangs by the street number or by name. So
yeah, they paint the equivalent blocks from the city of Los Angeles on the curbs to identify where the 14th Street Crips are or whatever. They've duplicated parts of LA County
right
on
white
sidewalks. Gangs are good, and sometimes because they put tattoos on them that say "I'm a Crip," it makes it really hard to get a job. But it's a
whole lot better for identification in criminal cases. Yeah, he was the guy that.
Yeah, there was a guy, and they just had some guy that got arrested here. He had a blue heart tattooed on his face, and the victim went, "Yeah, that's him in the mug book." And if you're going to tattoo, well, anyway, you see a guy with a swastika tattooed in the middle of his forehead, you don't want to, buy a gun from him or give him a job. Firearms Trust, a little commercial for Jerry Creed. He's an attorney here in Las Vegas, actually out in Summerlin. We've had some long talks. Jerry's been a friend of mine for years and years. He used to be partners with Mike Childs years ago. He does firearms trusts and class 3 firearms trusts. If you have a trust where you are attempting to make sure you can pass your guns, particularly class 3 guns, to your heirs without them going through probate and all this kind of thing, you need to talk to Jerry. The laws are changing on firearms trusts all the time. If you have a trust that you got off the internet where you filled it in yourself and put it in your safety deposit box, it is worthless under current law. If your trust isn't, without listing the guns, at least 15 pages, you have not complied with all the rules now. Silencers are apparently going to get taken off of the class 3 list sometime here shortly, and some short barrel shotguns are no longer being short barrel shotguns. Jerry, it can be reached in his office in Summerlin at 702-806-7777. If you have a firearms trust or want to get one to prevent taxes and so forth, talk to Jerry Creed. Great guy, knows what he's talking about, and is a friend.
So if I took my mother's, my deceased mother's, 2-shot Derringer that she was given, that she got as a present from my grandfather,
who stole it, but go ahead.
That's a long story, but and I just go ahead and frame it and hang it on the wall. Can I claim that it's art so it doesn't have to go through a trust?
Ask Jerry.
I will.
That comes up, and where it gets really into the woods is collectible guns that are by our laws class 3s, marble game getters and all sorts of things like that, that are exempt, but they have to be listed in a certain way. Otherwise, when it shows up in probate, they're going to get seized. So there are some legal protections there. It's such an involved area, I couldn't even begin because it's so in flux right now. It's amazing. The ATF is making it a lot easier to pass your guns to your children. And the problem is passing your guns to your children's children when you don't know their names because they're not born yet. That gets really tricky. So that's why you need the trust.
That's right. And that's why lawyers make up words like the laws against perpetuity.
Yes. There's you know about the Clark County Shooting Park, the perpetuity rule in that thing? Well, next time you're on the show, we're going to do
a purple something?
Perpetuity.
Oh, okay.
Perpetuity.
All right.
The county got the land use in perpetuity for it to be used as a gun range. And if they quit using it as a gun range, it reverts to the federal government, and they lose every nickel they put into it. That's the contract that was written. And there's some real problems with that. You got to have so many employees, you got to have so much land open, you got to do this, that, and the other thing, or you lose it. And Harry Reid's Range goes back to being a gravel pit. And the county's put in $1 billion into that thing of taxpayers' money, and they don't even actually own it. There was a case in U.S. Court of Appeals on Tuesday that blocked a gun regulation in Washington, D.C. This was some really good news. It just happened for gun owners. Washington, D.C. has limited the right to carry a handgun in public, and you need a special self-defense gun handling permit and so forth. A U.S. Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia, part of it, had a 2-to-1 ruling that struck down the local government's third attempt in 40 years to limit handgun rights, citing what was said to be a scant but clear guidance from the U.S. Supreme Court in the right to bear arms. You understand the Heller decision, the main decision about in D.C. that really screwed with their you can't have a gun laws, said you have a right to possess a firearm in your home. It didn't address carrying them outside the home. Now this 3-judge panel, they got sued, of course, over that. And one of the cases was heard by the smaller version of a district court by 3 Republican-appointed judges, as it happened, and they decided that that's illegal under the Constitution. It says right to keep and bear arms, not just in your house. So they decided you do have a right to carry a gun, and that D.C. has to issue or change their law that if you're carrying a gun openly, you can carry it in Washington, D.C. And they have to issue concealed weapon permits to people who ask, and there has to be some mechanism. Right now, there is no mechanism to go. You simply can't. So you can't carry a gun outside your house. They said you can. So Judge Thomas Griffith said, writing in the majority, the 2-to-1, said, constitutional challenges to gun laws create peculiar puzzles for the court. Noting the U.S. Supreme Court's first in-depth view is younger than the first iPhone. The 1928 ruling, landmark case, District of Columbia versus Heller, struck down a D.C. law that banned all handgun possession in the city, but it was limited to in your home. So now, this case is going to be reheard shortly by the rest of the D.C. Circuit Court, the other 9 who are all appointed by Democratic presidents. So we end up with a panel of the 3 Republicans on the court. Anyway, which is good because apparently that'll happen and the case will be set and go to the U.S. Supreme Court. And if they accept the case, which is likely, and it's likely by the time they do accept the case, we're looking 6 months down the line here, that we'll have another Republican judge appointed by Mr. Trump.
Well, so tell me your opinion. Give me your opinion on that limitation. Now, the right to bear arms, is that to just carry something, a handgun, for your personal use on your as a sidearm in a holster where it's clearly visible. How about if you're carrying a rifle around? It's clearly visible. Tell me what your opinion is on that.
That's the issue they're having now in Texas, because they're carrying rifles openly because they have a rule you can't carry a handgun openly that's being challenged.
But doesn't Texas have a law that you have to have at least 2 rifles in the back of your truck?
Well, yeah. And it's interesting in that this is really getting complicated. What is going on now, and just as a sidelight, because this is kind of part of the same issue, we have a recent study done by John Lott, who's a firearm scientist that does all kinds of data. He's an economic professor and so forth, has concluded that in concealed firearm carry in the United States, the updated estimate is more than 16.3 million people legally can carry concealed weapons. That Americans on a large basis are taking responsibility for their own safety rather than get in a fetal position and hope the cops get there before somebody kills you. The Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms has jumped onto this, and they have a bill in Congress that requires reciprocity between the sovereign states to accept and allow other states' concealed carry permits to be honored in their state. The bill currently between the Senate and the House has 200 co-sponsors. The 61-page report that Lott did shows that increased concealed carry from 2007 to 2015 coincided with the decline in national murder rate from 5.6 per 100,000 to 4.9 per 100,000 in the population. That's true, and I'm sure that people carrying concealed weapons have caused some people to rethink their crime. My issue here, and now you can stick your opinion out here, national concealed carry, the bill to require one state honor the other state's permit, it's going to be fought on a states' rights issue forever, I think is the wrong way to go. What we need is the Constitution says you have the right to keep and bear arms. What we need is national constitutional carry. Asking the federal government to regulate concealed carry between the states is asking for trouble. I realize the NRA is for it, and the Right to Keep and Bear Arms Committee is for it, but they're thinking not beyond the reach of their own nose. Sooner or later, Congress is going to become Democrat again. And looking at the next 50 years, is there some time when they're going to be Democrats or anti-gunners or liberals controlling the Supreme Court or controlling Congress? And when they do, and now we, the gun-owning public, has asked them to regulate firearms and carry of firearms between the states, they're liable to do that. I think we need to get the federal government out of the business of regulating concealed carry and leave it to the states alone. My opinion. I have very few that agree with me on that, but I think they're very short-sighted. Well, I'm looking at regulations that are going to come back to bite them in the butt.
That's true. The biggest concern I have about that is that the report shows that these two things coincided with each other. I prefer everybody to the book Freakonomics.
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect, which has nothing to do with something coinciding with something else. It could be completely alien from anything that is related to it in any way, shape, or form. Let's go ahead and consider that. There's some great arguments, and it's a real entertaining read. Freakonomics. The other thing is it's like the seatbelt law. So what's the seatbelt law, and how are we going to govern that? How many people, what weight do children have to be in seats? And A 14-year-old can drive during the daytime in Idaho, so does that mean that they can drive during the daytime here in Nevada? I think it's much more, it's better for the local states to handle it, because there's so many
they are way closer to their own problems socially and crime-wise to decide what they want to do. I'm just opposing to ask the federal government to regulate firearms. The Constitution is very clear. A militia, for those of you who don't have the explanation, is the whole of the people. It originally was white males between 18 and 40, and we've changed that now. Who has the right to keep and bear arms when the thing was written and so forth. But I don't want to start over in constitutional law, who a guy who went to law school. But I just think it's a very short-sighted thing to ask Congress to regulate. They shouldn't be regulating interstate commerce in firearms anyway.
Well, given the way the Congress and Senate are right now, I don't know that they could pass any laws.
They couldn't regulate anything if they had to.
That's
so
right.
Hopefully, the NRA will back up and look at this and go, we're asking Congress to regulate concealed carry. Look at the downside to that. Ask them to regulate. How about ask them to regulate water and what's a lake and what isn't a lake and what's a national park and what, right. They should regulate stuff that's congressional. Going to war, having borders. Should we have a border at the United States? Should there be an edge where you say this is the United States? Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of issues. Anyway, right. Back to where we're on.
Rights. The Colorado River.
And what if it changes course? Then
no. Let's change some courses of other rivers and get some water back in the Colorado River. We're thirsty down here in Las Vegas.
Gun show's coming up. Crossroads of the West Gun Show is in Reno, July 29 and 30 at the Reno Convention Center. I have some passes for that. If you'd like to go to that show, I think it's $15 to get in. Send me an email or a text to that number and I will mail you a pass. Armagosa coming up July 29 and 30, the Armagosa Community Center on Farm Road in Armagosa Valley. That's really a cool show because a lot of the dealers from Northern Nevada come into that show. You see a lot of people you don't see in Las Vegas. Western Trails is running a gun and knife show on August 12 and 13 at the Eastside Cannery. Crossroads will be back at Cashman Field on August 26 and 27. Again, same pass. I have passes for the Crossroads show. So we are there, and next week we'll have one of apparently an attorney that you supervise, Clark Patrick. I didn't realize you were a supervisor. Boy, I can get into that. Wait till he shows up next time. I will do something that he don't want to hear. Clark is going to be back again. He's does mostly murder defenses and is very knowledgeable on this kind of stuff.
He has great trial attorney
and great trial sense and a great gun guy. I mean, owns all kinds of stuff and is a hunter and on and on. And good guy to have on. So we've got 2 in a row here. And hopefully usually what I do is I write the outline to fit the guest. I have firearms instruction cases. I have a firearms instructor on and so forth. So knowing when you're coming, I'm going to fill this up with legal issues in self-defense because there are a lot of them. And one of the points of this show is that you be able to defend yourself and not go to jail and not get sued out of your socks. Right? It's a big deal. And will you get sued if you shoot somebody? Yes. Every other billboard in Las Vegas and every other radio ad or TV ad says what? Did somebody hurt you today? Call me, I'll sue, no fee unless we win. The guy who you hurt has a free lawyer. You don't. So, thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much.
We're out of time.
Great to see you, my friend.
I appreciate it. Yeah, this is great. I didn't do any good stories about how many people I arrested in court when you were there, but when Randy's sitting as a pro tem and you forget to go to DUI school and you show up and say, I forgot, you're going to do your DUI school in jail because you have your 100% attention, right?
That's right. They'll pay attention and it'll happen quickly. That's right.
Thank you all for tuning in to Fire It Up. We will be back next week with Clark Patrick, and check out the website for older shows and so forth. And we'll be back next week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.